want to tell you a story about how we opened up a store based upon a word of knowledge. Now, a word of knowledge is a gift of the Spirit. It's found in 1 Corinthians 12, and this particular word of knowledge is in verse 8. And it's divine knowledge that God gives a person to bring forth His will in that person's life or in a situation. Now, usually with that is going to come a faith, because a person sometimes is going to need faith to act on that word. Well, anyway, let me tell you how how we received a word of knowledge and it caused us to open up a store. This happened about 16 years ago, and we were photographers, and I had been using a local lab that was giving me great prints for a great price, and then I found out they were going to close. Now, this was in the day where we used film, so if you sent your film through the mail to a faraway lab and they lost it, it could be disastrous, especially if you're shooting weddings, which I was doing at that time. This put me in a dilemma, because there was really no other local labs around that could do the same job. And I was talking to Tony on a walk one day, my husband, and I'm like, Tony, what am I going to do? I don't know what I'm going to do. And all of a sudden, I had instant information, and I looked at Tony, and I go, Tony, the Lord says we're going to open up a 1-hour lab. I don't know how I didn't hear a voice. I don't know how I knew. I just knew, and when I knew, I spoke it. Anyway, that was in May. So I went home to investigate to see how much it was going to cost to open up a 1-hour lab, and I went to the internet, and one film processor who just processes filmed, brand new machine, $15,000. A printer, $25,000 brand new. The rents in our area started at $1,200 and went to $1,600, and by the time I got done investigating it, it's like, I don't want to do this. This is too expensive. All I'll be doing is working for machines and rent, and I don't want to do it. And so I forgot about it, and I went off to play. Well, God didn't forget about it. So we came up to about August, and I was on the beach praying and meditating, and the Lord started to speak to me about opening up that store. I want you to open up that store. And I'm like, all right, Lord, if you'll release the money, I'll open the store. That was on a Friday. So I went home, got my kids on the couch, and I said, because I always like to tell my kids what the Lord is telling me so they can see how the Lord works in a person's life. And I said, kids, I told the Lord, that if He would release the money, I'd open a store. Let's just see what He does. So later that day, I thought, well, I got to do my part. So I called the Better Business Bureau, and I made an appointment with them on Monday to talk about getting a loan. And when I got there were 3 businessmen, and they asked me questions like, well, do you have a business plan? I go, no. And they go, well, do you know who your customers are going to be? I go, no. And they asked me some more questions. They were looking very confused. And then they go, well, we want to loan you this money, but we can't until you answer some of these questions. And I go, that's okay. And I walked out the door. So there's Friday, Monday, and now Wednesday, a girl who had been working at that lab, she calls me and she goes, Barb, she goes, they're starting to move out some machines and moving out the film processor. And I asked them if they would sell it to somebody local. Are you interested? I go, I don't know how much. Now that was the one that cost $15,000 brand new. They sold it to me for $1,500. I put it on a charge card, and that Friday I have my first piece of equipment in my garage. The next Wednesday she calls, Barb, this time they're moving out the printer. Are you interested? Now that was the one that cost $25,000. I go, I don't know how much. I put it on a charge card for $2,500. Now I got 2 machines in my garage. Well, the guy I had been working with, Enrique, he calls me, he goes, Barbie, he goes, I've got one more machine for you. This one does 11 by 14s and 8 by 10s, and I'll sell it to you for $3,500. I go, Enrique, I'm getting a little nervous about how much I'm putting on my charge card. He goes, Barbara, he says, this machine goes brand new for $65,000. I go, oh, can I have a minute to check this out? And so I hung up, went to the internet. It was true. That machine went for $65,000 brand new and $25,000 used. So I called him back up. I go, Enrique, I'll buy it for $3,500. Well, so now I have 3 pieces of equipment in my garage. Well, anyway, later that week or sometime, I was going up our local street in our town, and I noticed a store that sold signs, and I thought to myself, hey, I've got 3 machines in my garage. I'm probably going to need a store, and if I need a store, I'm going to need a sign. So I walk in there to find out how much signs cost, and their store's a mess. And they go, oh, we're sorry, we're moving. I go, really? I go, how much you been paying for rent? And they go, $400. I secured that place for $450. So now, within 3 weeks, I have a store and a complete lab. The story doesn't end here because we've never run a lab before. We've never even worked in one before. Talk about going forward in ignorance. Well, God worked that out. We met a lab owner about 20 miles away, and he took pity on us. We told him our story, and he told Tony how to run the machines, and he sold us some of his extra chemicals because we didn't really need any. We didn't have any customers yet. And then there's something else. I mean, some other complication here. I talked about being nervous about getting into that debt, and the reason was because years before we had been in debt and had a hard time paying it back, and I was like, that was a bad memory. Don't want to go there again. But the Lord was telling me, Barbara, he says, I'm leading you into this. He says, trust me to help you meet those debts that you're incurring. Well, how he worked that out, I did the math, and it was going to take, we had to double our income to make this thing work. Well, he did better than that. God gave us $10,000 over doubling it, and I was able to pay that credit card off in a year. This was quite a story for our family, and it proved to me once again, God is faithful. If he tells me to do something, I'm to trust him and to go forward. And the same for you. If he's told you to do something, believe him and go forward. Trust him. He's got your back. He had my back, and I know he's going to have your back. Anyway, a word of knowledge is divine information. It's given to you by God. It's to bring forth his will in your life or in that of a situation. It's always going to come with the faith to go with it, because trust me, you're going to need faith. You're going to need faith to act on these words of knowledge. Anyway, you're listening to Barb Keisman, Dare to Dream once more.